Thank you all for being here with us. I know it's the end of the day. It's been a full drinking from a fire hose kind of day for us all, so we really appreciate you being here. So again, I'm Jennifer Sanders. I'm with the Dallas Innovation Alliance, and I'm just really thrilled to be here this afternoon with this panel. This is monetizing data is certainly something that we at the DIA, as a nonprofit working with the city, is really focused on. The city itself is very focused on how do we approach and strategize around this? How do we balance, particularly from externally monetizing the data? What does the city do with the data it's collecting when there are inquiries from outside parties to purchase that data or utilize it? How do they balance their open data transparency strategy with finding new ways to develop revenue opportunities when cities can be struggling from a budgetary perspective? So I'm here to learn as well as to interact with this great panel. So I would love to just ask each of you to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your approach to data monetization and maybe an example of a project or something that you all have done recently around that.
Sure. I'm Ed Abrams, and I lead the enterprise IoT business for Samsung here in the United States. We've done a lot with our clients on monetization of data. And it's all started with a clear understanding of who owns that data. Is it truly the customer's data? Is it the city's data? Is it our data? And our conversations always start from that perspective. A good example of where and how we are effectively helping clients to monetize data is actually in the area of smart medicine, believe it or not, where we're using various customers' data with their permission to help drive greater success, if you would, in curative rates, in remote patient monitoring, in overall hospital asset management as examples of ways that we're using data to actually drive true ROI, to drive more effectiveness through their overall operation. And we can do the same in a city's environment, and we are doing the same in a city's environment. I'm just not able to talk to those references right now.
I'm Brett Messer. Can you hear me now? I'm Brett Messer. I'm the CIO for the city of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we're doing quite a bit with not only our open data platform, but trying to find ways to, as Jennifer said earlier, to turn some of that into extra revenue, if at all possible. We've just started that process, but one of the ways that we're actually using it to monetize, if you want to think about it from a time perspective, is we use it to make ourselves better. We look at it from a lean management type perspective, and we have data meetings to go through the data and try to figure out trends in the way that we're conducting business and the way that we can actually make business a little more efficient in the city as one starting way in which we can monetize it. Now we're open for other options as to how we can monetize that.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vanja Sparic. I head up product management for InterDigital IoT Solutions. We are a technology provider, and the way that we've been kind of handling data monetization is we've been working with different parties in the smart city segment, one of them being environmental monitoring and another transportation infrastructure. So to kind of reference a little bit the question at hand about data monetization, is for the past couple of years, we've been involved with the UK transport authorities and a highways agency and actually a number of other partners in this initiative called One Transport. And the whole idea was the ability of these kind of smaller transport authorities to kind of come together and pull their data together, whether that's sensor data, road data, different CCT cameras data, and kind of pull it into an open transport data marketplace. And the idea behind that is this kind of whole data monetization on a high level, but really the idea is for these transport authorities to be able to share data amongst themselves and to be able to share data with, let's say, analytics providers or application developers who want to do something with that data, right? So with this kind of open marketplace, you can kind of look to pool and leverage and monetize and broker your data, but of course, ultimately with the whole idea of doing something with that data. So there are a number of applications that we have also built as part of that initiative that include anything, as simple as smarter journey planning to a full-blown event management or transportation around event management. So that's just some examples that we've been seeing, but obviously the idea is to kind of open this up a little bit more, commercialize it, and over the kind of coming years to see even more examples of how that data can be utilized and monetized.
Thank you so much. And Vanya, just to follow up, I know when you're taking on a project like this, obviously bringing this many agencies' data into one system, can you talk a little bit about how you approach data standards and some pieces around that?
Yeah, so InterDigital really very much, we are a 40-year-old company, and we really have always endorsed open standards and kind of have taken that standards approach. So in the IoT space, similarly, we have leveraged standards like 1M, 2M, which is an open standard for a service layer for data ingestion and device management. On another kind of level, we also have an open integration and orchestration framework. Will let you kind of integrate different data, different systems, different applications together, so you can truly kind of both manage and leverage all the different data that can come in. So, we have seen that through this project and other numerous projects, is that, the ability to leverage open standards and recycle as much as you can from one project to the next really kind of lets you achieve those kind of economies of scale that you really want in these kind of applications.
Does anyone else want to jump in on the standard?
No, I think the standards piece is key, right? But part of IoT in the world that we live in today is there are too many standards at the moment, if you think about it. And so one of the things you've got to consider as you're looking at your data management layer in your platforms is, can you find a platform that is capable of cleaning data of all types, so that it can effectively then be put into a marketplace, be put into your big data and analytics engine in a way that works effectively. I mean, I've described it to my kids at home as IoT is a little bit like the United Nations without translators. Right? All the data is talking very, very differently. And unless we can find platforms that allow us to clean that data, translate that data, that is the key in the area of investment that we all need to look at to, in fact, get to the area of a brokered environment or a true data analytics engine that can be monetized.
And so are there any regions or countries or entities that you think are doing a good job at starting to collate those standards? It's a loaded question.
It's a loaded question. It really is. There are. I won't say it's regions. I think you're starting to see various industries drive better standardization for themselves, right? And that is what is driving success. We at Samsung are seeing the retail industry start to settle on data standards, the healthcare industry settle on data standards, the travel and transportation industries settle on data standards. The place, quite honestly, that we're seeing the biggest struggle point is in the smart city space, because there are just so many different entities, even within a single metropolitan area, who are driving different initiatives, that it's causing tension. And, I don't have the magic bullet as to how we're going to solve that, but I think it's ultimately going to come from the city leadership, who will set requirements for all vendors like us to play in their environment. I don't know, Brett, if you feel differently.
No, you hit the nail right on the head. In fact, one of the last conversations I had with the mayor before coming here this week was actually talking about some of those standards and what we're going to do to set up how vendors are going to do things. One of the latest thing that we're working with now is the small cell, and being able to set standards and set policy and set administration type rules for small cell and what vendors are going to be allowed to do, what they're not going to be allowed to do. We as a municipality, we don't want to support Verizon over AT&T. We don't want to support one company over another. We want to support them all. We want every one of them to be there. We have our citizens have equal opportunity for not only data and bandwidth, but be able to utilize all networks as best as possible, because that's best for the community. That's revenue for us from a tax base. So yeah, that's a huge, huge area for us right now with regulation.
Well, I know in Dallas, one of the things, so the DIA just launched its Living Lab yesterday, so that's our phase 1 pilot where we're putting a number of technologies into a compressed geographic area. But one of the pieces that we're going to begin to pilot around the small cell discussion, because there's obviously concerns, one, around just aesthetics, and creating Christmas trees, as the city calls it, around too much equipment and taking away from quality of life and maintenance and things like that. But one of the pieces that we put in that the city is hopefully going to test out is one of these digital kiosks, which now they're including these chambers where it can hold up to 4 small cells. So to your point, in terms of not wanting to favor a vendor over another, if we can provide enough storage really to be able to, one, obviously boost that connectivity, and two, aesthetically they're enclosed and you're not picking favorites. We're trying to get creative in what we test out from that perspective as well. But Brent, just to take a step back, because obviously the network and that backbone is so critical to capturing this data in the first place. Over the last several years, I've loved watching Chattanooga put in the municipal fiber network. And so I just wondered if you wanted to just take a minute and talk about that process and that implementation.
Sure. Well, basically it's a giant smart grid. We put the process in place to actually work from an energy perspective. We took what little bit of dark fiber we had, we added about 900 square miles more fiber, and so we now connect 600 some odd square miles worth of homes and businesses throughout the city, and in surrounding areas, including some of the surrounding counties, and that's about 185 different subscribers for that. So putting that network in place has been a huge revenue boost, not only for the city, but also for the businesses that are around there in that city. So it's been a good thing. 2015, we went from offering 1 gigabit service to 10 gigabit service. So now we do have the fastest capable internet service that you can possibly get in the nation, which is great. Which has gone and driven, more economic development for the city, because we've brought in companies like Volkswagen, we've brought in startups and various other tech companies like OpenTable and various things like that, just simply because of the infrastructure that we have in place. So now that it's all fresh and new, now comes the challenge of how do we implement that from an IoT perspective? How do we start? We have the infrastructure, so now let's take what data we do have, structure it in some ways to make it useful, figure out a way to monetize it, and then of course go out and capture more data. So things like putting sensors in parking meters so that most of our traffic is generated from people driving around downtown looking for a parking space. We did a study, we figured that out. Okay, so how do we solve that problem? Well, one way we can do that is with smart parking, smart meters that have sensors in the meters that can tell whether there's a car there or not, and maybe that can interface with, say, an app on a phone or an in-car infotainment center and tell you directly where you need to go to park, and then you don't have all that stuff, just to kind of give you an example of that. So the network's been great.
Absolutely. And so, Ed, just thinking through that, the additional revenue opportunities when we talk about kind of the internal monetization of data for cities, can you talk a little bit about, maybe anecdotally, about some of the work you guys have done?
Sure. We've actually done a lot of work in that area, and it comes down to, again, finding, as Brent said, what are the right use cases, and the right use cases for monetization tend to be around areas that serve the general population best inside a city environment. So whether it's smart parking, which has significant benefit to the city in reducing congestion and improving every other situation, it's also got benefit for the constituents of the city as well, right? They're not frustrated, they're not seeing any issues there. We've seen success in standing up narrowband and local Wi-Fi networks for constituents in the city as a way to monetize value back to the constituents, right? Again, thinking about how it is that you can take all of the information, how you can, again, City of New York is a great example of this. They had all those old payphone stands. They've made each one of them a wireless hotspot, right? That is, again, finding ways to monetize value into the city, right? There's subscription associated with that, where there's free service levels associated with that. So there's good examples of how you can take an IoT capability and begin to drive revenue out of it. At the same time, look at the way You can, through automotive sensors, do surge-based pricing. Again, New York City is a very good example of what's going on there with surge-based pricing on tolls and things like that, that again, help you to monetize the data that's in your network today. What's key in monetizing all that data, though, is also protecting the PII data behind it, right? How do you do this in a way that this is autonomous data, but still allowing you to be successful? What do we have to do as a vendor in that? We have to ensure that we provide a secure network infrastructure for you to manage that data over. We have to provide a secure IoT platform that is controlling all of those sensors and ensuring there is no data intrusion, data leakage, right? But those are some of the things that we're seeing in terms of how cities, how customers are really starting to begin to monetize data. And then there's a flip side of that too, where we're seeing the constituents, the businesses in the city also have a monetization opportunity, because as they set up their own IoT environments, whether it is a private real estate firm that is collecting smart building information, the ability for that information to be shared and sold back to the city for things like power consumption, for things like water consumption, provide a two-way street. And these are some of the early proof of concept type of projects that we're seeing as it now goes from, okay, I put an IoT environment in place, to how do I get real return on investment in that environment.
And so this question is for anyone that wants to take it, but we talk a lot about best practices, but and again, anecdotally, obviously without naming names, what are some of the lessons learned that you have either seen or experienced that we can all kind of take away and learn from?
All right. Well, some of the lessons learned, I guess, from our experiences, I would say, we already talked about customer engagement, the end user engagement. That's definitely important to kind of have your end user buy-in. Second thing, the importance of public-private partnerships. I think as we're kind of starting to kick off, these smart city initiatives, there may not be ample funding for all the great things that we want to do. So forming those kind of public-private partnerships to start goes a long way. I think some of the other things that we've learned through these latest deployments is that oftentimes there are challenges that kind of go beyond technical. And what I mean by that is, as we were in the process of integrating some 300 different data sources for this one transport, is we learned that oftentimes, cities don't even necessarily know what data they have and who owns that data. So kind of figuring that out, is one thing. Getting consensus and kind of building momentum behind, the cities and, getting them to all kind of work together is another aspect. Expanding that beyond just a single city, I think for, different kind of entities, different cities to share the lessons that they've learned, I think also goes a long way. I mean, there's, one thing is a perspective that a vendor can provide to a city, but, a perspective that, one city can provide to another. So I was speaking earlier about Brent and, the evangelizing that he does in numerous shows and cities. I think, some of those lessons learned and, things that they can leverage from each other, is really important. So, it's kind of like, beyond the standard question that we're talking about, the alliances and, the committees and councils like the Dallas, Council Alliance. Those kind of venues really serve, as kind of a great place for, people to exchange ideas, to form ecosystems and, really kind of leverage each other's knowledge. So those are some of the things. I mean, I can go on, but I'll give a chance to Brent and Ed to speak.
So, as a municipality, we fall down a lot. We make a lot of mistakes, and but that's a good thing, because as the private sector knows, you have to be able to fail and fail as fast as possible so that you can pick up and move on. And that's something that we've learned as a municipality. In government, it's kind of difficult with all the policy and the bureaucratic stuff that goes on to be able to do that. So we've tried to create an environment that will help with that, and that's one of the things we've learned over the years, especially implementing the fiber network. Some of the other aspects of that are being able to know exactly what data we have. As was mentioned a minute ago, we had to go through and dig through every piece of data and who owns that data, who controls that data, what is that data for, why are we storing this data, and then how we can put it to use. As I mentioned earlier, we use it statistically right now, but we're looking for other ways to be able to do that. And one way we've learned along the way, and it's kind of one of those lessons learned that has turned into a positive, is not being able to utilize that data and then having all of it and looking at it and going, all right, now what? And we've got this great infrastructure. You know, it's not like we could just put a meeting together and say, okay, now innovate. Go to town. I want ideas, let's go. That doesn't happen. So we learned real quick that by the interactions, as you mentioned earlier, those interactions, those face-to-face interactions, not just me coming out doing this, but we created a district in our town, our innovation district, where a lot of the tech hub and where a lot of the municipal hub are all together. And we have those open spaces, and we allow city staff as well as other staff to come into our facility, and we send them out to their facilities, and you know, because that's where those ideas and those collaborations. And then, of course, from the data perspective, we do want to protect some data, and we do want to make sure that we have it secure, but at the same time, we want to open up as much of it as possible, because who knows, you may have 10 ideas of what to do with that data, you know, more than I do. So being able to share those experiences and being able to push that out is one thing we've learned over the years.
I knew I shouldn't have gone third. You guys took all of the lessons learned. No, I will just reiterate a couple of quick things, right? Number one, starting with a clear objective as to the problem you're trying to solve. Right? You may not solve it on day one, but start with that as the highest level goal. Because too often we've seen customers say, well, I don't know, I just want to collect this data and I'll figure out what to do with it later. Right? That never works. Start out by saying, what problem are you trying to solve? What improvement are you trying to make? Then, proof of concept, fail fast, right? But make sure that you are building, as you even see success in your proof of concept, a capability that can scale. The one thing that I didn't hear mentioned up here, and we've seen too many times, is people found a way to solve a problem or to provide a service in a proof of concept environment, but when it was time to take it out to the full constituency, they had no idea how to make it scale. So as you think about deployments, as you think about taking data out of your systems and using it to provide better service to your constituents, provide better management of your own business processes, your own city processes. Just always be looking at it from that standpoint of how will this scale, and does that scale give me the affordability that I'm looking for?
Incredible points. And, you know, two things that Mayor Rollins in Dallas, you know, continues to say is, I have no issue being a fast second. Right, we want to be able to learn from each other, and what I've been really gratified by, and Vanya mentioned this, is that the willingness of cities all over the country to really work together and be extraordinarily candid. Here's what I did. Here's what I would never do again. Please don't do this. Please leapfrog that. You know, and I know we're just kind of baby stepping in Dallas, right, and have just launched this. But any city that comes after me, I want to be able to move faster than I did, right? And so that's key. And the second thing that our mayor says is, ultimately, if this doesn't improve people's lives, there's no point to it. He's like, I don't care about the gadgets unless it does that. So when we talk about service delivery and how can we use this data to complement food deserts and things like that, can we find new ways to get services to people that may not be able to as we solve the larger mobility issues that I think all cities are facing? So I just got the 5-minute warning, so I'd love to see if there's any questions in the room.
mechanisms or what kind of organizations are in place, maybe should be in place to kind of share best practices, vendor solutions, grassroots solutions, and then kind of a second question is, how are you using this as kind of workforce management or digital industry training, things of that nature? So, 2 questions, but somewhat related.
Okay, just some ideas as to the different venues that one can leverage. I mean, in the U.S. and I think now it's kind of spreading internationally. There is a body called Smart City Council that organizes workshops for different cities and and the ecosystem. It really is representing suppliers, but nevertheless the lessons are shared and learned. So that's one example venue. More privately, I know analysts also organize things where they do research with different smart cities and kind of pull that data together. Specifically on the initiative in the UK, in the transportation infrastructure sector, these transport authorities that we have been working together, so there are probably about 150 of them in the country. 40% of that have formed this transport data initiative kind of alliance, where they meet every month to discuss different aspects about their data and what they're trying to do. And they're always kind of getting new members and are happy to share their knowledge base and lessons that they've learned both nationally and on international levels. So there are bodies out there. I think they are forming more and more, and we've seen them kind of spring up in the past year. So those are just some examples. I'm not sure if you guys have some additional.
Yeah, we utilize. I mean, there's several organizations out there that we're members of. Smart Cities Alliance is one of them. Alliance for Innovation is one of them. And then What Works Cities is also one of them. And strangely enough, Code for America is also another one that we utilize for that brain trust for being able to share that information back and forth between municipalities. And even though we are a municipality, we do actually, it's a strange thing, we compete with other municipalities because we want the companies to come set up shop there. That's revenue for us. But at the same time, it's a good competition because we want to share that knowledge, and the better we can make things worldwide, the better it'll be.
So I'll take your second question, right? I've seen from when I look at this space that the Smart Cities Alliance, as well as Gartner, who's got a number of analysts who specifically cover the smart city space, have both published a lot of good work on how to manage workflow, how to manage task management, all of those elements of in building a smarter city, what type of infrastructure, what type of staffing, what type of programming should you be thinking of. So those are a couple of good resources there.
So I'm curious, as you mentioned before, about the need to have a secure platform, obviously, and when you're talking about device data, PII, municipal data, how do you talk about ensuring sanctity of that data, not only from the input, from an end user perspective, but also from the entities who are going to be using and monetizing that data to ensure that it's authenticated properly on both ends of the spectrum?
Right, right. There's not an easy answer to that, and I'm going to try not to give you an answer that sells Samsung for that. But a lot of what you'll need to look at as you consider that is security at not only the different layers that you've talked about and across the different constituents, but at your IoT management platform level to make sure that data coming in off of the various sensors is encrypted and clean, that data flowing out to those sensors is encrypted and clean, and that you're thinking beyond just those IoT devices to the traditional mobile device, and that you're looking at mobile devices that provide more than software level encryption capability. Again, I'm trying to not be brand specific here very hard, but I can help you with all of those.
Okay, so the hand in the back first.
This is more for Brent and Jennifer. With respect to the data, there's several times in such questions without answer of who owns the data. From a municipality perspective, is there any kind of legal or is there any kind of law or regulatory type of mandate that dictates how you use that data, how you provide that data to third parties. For example, like it's the smart parking. Can that data be then, since if it is a tax, if it's a municipal type of service, is that data available to third parties since it is a taxpayer fund, or are you regulated from providing any information? And you've got like information from net, like compared to like a Netflix or a Google who can do anything they want to a large extent.
We have pretty much the same regulations that Netflix or Google or anybody else would. I mean, obviously, there's HIPAA in place for personal protected data and various things like that, but it's from a regulatory standpoint, no. It's like it's the Wild West right now in the IoT world, right? So that's why we're struggling as a municipality to be able to come up with types of ways that we can, structure it in a way that it's safe and it's beneficial to everybody. But as of right now, no. There's other than the main ones, there's no regulatory environment.
And our organization is a little bit unique in that we're a separate freestanding 501c3, and we purposefully for the pilot have said that the city, we're not asking you for any funding whatsoever, so we can really operate from that perspective. So some of the data we have coming in from the pilot, we own outright, and it's in some cases licensed back for use to the third party. In some cases, it's the inverse of that. So we have the perpetual license to utilize it. And the goal is, with the exception of PPI or data that just can't be shared, everything will live on the city's open data portal, so it can be immediately accessed by citizens and built on top of. So that's how we're approaching it, at least for this first phase. How are we doing on time? Are we out? Close. One more?
Wrapping up at 5:15, so you have a few minutes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, any more questions? I think I saw some other hands. There we go.
Thanks. Wanted to piggyback off the security question. In the context of smart city, and this is for everyone on the panel, do you feel as though we need to set up a clearly defined set of kind of shared responsibility model? Very much as cloud providers came out, there was an understanding of what the cloud provider is responsible for in an infrastructure as a service environment versus what the developers or customers of that service were provided responsible for. How would you, and if so, how would you define those lines of responsibility in the context of IoT deployment in a smart city?
So it's a really good question. The short answer to the first part of the question is yes, right? This has to be something that is co-developed, vendor, integrator, municipality, all together from a security perspective. And not in a single instance, but again, as a broad-based community, just like it was with cloud. When you look at cloud 10 years ago, they tried to do regulation at the federal level. It was an absolute disaster. So it has to be built bottoms up. What are the roles and responsibilities? To me, and this is, I'm just giving you my answer and I'm not running for anything, right? It's kind of a follow the data kind of answer, if you would, right? Ultimately, the municipality owns the responsibility to protect its citizens and needs to provide the basic level of security and privacy standard that is going to be delivered. The systems integrator layer then needs to design a total solution that respects those specific requirements. And then as the vendors, we need to design devices, networks, platforms, etc., that follow the protocols that ultimately, allow for various levels of data to pass through one layer to the next. It's kind of a squishy answer. I realize that. I've said a lot of nothing in that. But basically what I'm trying to say is the municipality has to set the base requirement. The systems integrator has to look across the different pieces to understand who and how will own the delivery of the data. And then the individual vendors who own that delivery of data have to build their systems such that they meet the privacy requirements of the municipality. I don't know other way to do it.
I was just going to ask kind of a follow-up question there, because I'm continuing to hear more and more about blockchain as being a piece of adding these layers in this recording. Are you all seeing that? If you did, I'd love to hear it.
I think I see a lot of people asking about it, and there's some traction for it, or more so in specific sectors. Mm-hmm. It's not something that we have implemented or used in any of our solutions to date, but it's coming, over the next 5 to 10 years. I see that it will definitely proliferate. Yeah.
I would agree. We're seeing a lot of use of blockchain in the financial services space today, in pilots and experimentation, but as soon as that tips, it will become a standard that becomes ubiquitous.
All right, any other questions? All right, closing statement time. If there's one piece of advice that you all would give to the audience, how many in the audience are from cities or municipalities? So we've got a handful here. So either crystal ball predictions, or what's one thing you think that our audience should take away?
Come visit Chattanooga.
Well played, well played.
Come see our infrastructure. We'll give you a tour.
Yeah, I would just play off of that and say that, it is really important as you're planning your strategies to assess, what is it that you really want to do, but then, look at the lessons learned and, other deployments and, other examples, and try to leverage that, before you kind of undertake to do everything yourself.
Yeah. I'd say a similar thing, right? And that is, think big, but start small. And that's not just for the municipality, that's for the vendors, the partners, the integrators, everybody in this room, right? If we're not thinking about the end game when we start, we're never going to get there.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody.